Welcome to another episode of PLP, Parent Like a Professional. We're here with all BCBAs, Board Certified Behavior Analysts, Stephanie Amari, Monica Yanokita, and Marky Helms. I'm Dr. Eric Meyer, and today we're going to talk about the effects of tangibly maintained behaviors. And what does that mean? Monica Yanokita, what does that mean? What does it mean when something is a tangibly maintained behavior?
So it is a behavior that one person is engaging in order to access something. So like a tangible, something that they want. So it could be food, it could be a toy. That's usually kind of what we're talking about with kids, food and toys mostly.
Right.
Sweet.
And there's a history of someone, most likely the younger they are, parents, as they get older, maybe parents, sibling, other family members, grandparents, as they get a little older and they're in school, teachers and other students, someone or many are providing, access to the things that they want, regardless of how they ask and what they do. And so now they have this history of reinforcement for getting access to these items. And that's why they communicate what they want the way that they do. And we say communication could be, anywhere from a vocal mode of communicating by asking for something, a one word response. It could be something like, I want milk, full sentence response. It could be a gesture where they're pointing or taking the parent by the hand, or it could be a tantrum or falling to the floor and they're saying, I want this now. And if they receive it, then that's a functional way of communicating and has worked for them in the past. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. So how do we change that, you guys? Let's talk a little more about in terms of when we say, what does it mean, for something to be tangibly maintained? And we'll talk more about that. But, maybe we should start off with some examples, some more examples of, behaviors that are tangibly maintained, whether we use them, with our own, examples of our own children or examples of what we've seen out in our environment. So who wants to jump in?
I'll start. I think with younger kids that maybe don't have the language skills, right? They're learning to talk, or they're young, like grabbing toys away from other kids. Like that's one that you might see more in, like with younger, like toddlers, or like preschool age children, where they'll just take the toy from the other child and they'll just snatch it away and take it, and then without asking. And that's age approach. I mean, they're all doing it to each other, but that's the time that you would teach to say, like, my turn, or if you want to keep it short, just like saying the name of it. But a lot of times, like with the younger kiddos, it's like grabbing toys. They see it, they want it, they grab it, and now it's theirs. And so that would be an example of like an early on behavior that you would see that's may not be excessive, but it could turn into be an excessive behavior over time.
Another one that I think that happens a lot for the same kind of age group would be like whining for things, like even before maybe they do have a small verbal repertoire of asking for things, but sometimes they just immediately go to whining because that's usually what gets them what they want faster than even asking. So just that little 2-year-old whine. Just kind of like those noises and those to get what they want. That's kind of before the tantrum.
Yeah, and we were talking about this, before starting this, discussion on tangibly maintained behavior, but we were talking a little bit about how it's natural for parents to want to give in or give their child something when they're crying or they're whining. And there's, a variety of reasons, but one is that, you have this internal feeling where, you feel as a parent what we call anxiety. That's, heart rate is up, you start to sweat. You don't feel good about your child experiencing this discomfort of not having what they want. And so then we give in, for maybe, that might be one reason why we give in. Or we could be in a public location, at a store, at the grocery mart, and your child throws a tantrum there and you're embarrassed and, you don't want to subject other people, to your child's behavior. So you might give in and give them what they want there as well, because they're making a scene. But, that's a temporary short-term solution. That's not a long-term solution. It becomes a long-term problem. Marquis, expand on that. What do we mean by it becomes a short-term solution, a long-term problem?
when we have a kid that is used to getting what they want when they're doing the wrong thing and getting instant access to tangible items as soon as they want it, they can be set up for life in expecting instant gratification, which isn't realistic in the real world. It's not realistic for us as adults to expect everything immediately right when we want it. And it might not be full-blown tantrums as an adult, but it could be displayed in some inappropriate interactions, or not being able to engage socially and not being able to wait, leaving jobs because you're not getting things your way. And so in that moment, it feels very small. And one time is not going to harm them. But when we're talking about 10 times, 100 times, that is the lasting impact that it can have.
Yeah, let's talk more about that. So, we when we started this, we were saying, like, something that is a tangibly maintained behavior. What we're basically saying is that, whatever response or behavior they're engaging in has worked for them in the past in getting what they want, access to something that they want. And so whether it's using, like I said, words, or throwing a tantrum, falling to the floor, or engaging in property destruction, throwing things on the floor, or becoming aggressive, whatever it might be, if that's what they did, and then it's followed by access to what they wanted, then what we're going to see is more of that. And, part of the problem, like we said, a lot of times parents will give in because they're uncomfortable, possibly, that their child is either engaging in these behaviors and it's embarrassing because they're out in public, or they feel this discomfort because they don't want their child to feel this discomfort. And in the short term, yes, you give them what they want, they stop the tantrum. In the long term, what you're doing is you're shaping up some, really interesting but maladaptive and inappropriate behaviors that will have long-term effects on your child as a teenager, and also as an adult. So what kind of effects would we see? Like, what kind of problems could we possibly see if we're not training our family members, our children, to be okay with this discomfort, understanding that, having this discomfort is normal, not getting what you want, having the experience of not always getting what you want and experiencing what it's like to be denied something that you really want. Well, if you don't put your child through that, then they're going to experience that as a teenager when they're kicked off the football team or the baseball team or gymnastics because they're uncoachable, or it happens when they get employed and they feel like they're the employer, they're the boss, because that's what they're used to. They're kind of used to directing and instructing everybody around them, and that's how they were used to getting what they wanted. They have a history of that, and so now they're unemployable. And then at some point, they become intimate with another person. They get involved in this relationship, and it's short lasting, meaning that other person is not going to deal with somebody who's a grown adult acting like a 6-year-old when they don't get what they want. And I've seen that. I've had experiences working with people in the past where, and not necessarily, at the organization I'm at, but consulting with other organizations where they have people in their 40s, and when that person is given feedback, they become very emotional. And I'm thinking, like, wow, this is something outside of what's going on here, that they have a long history of not getting feedback or the type of feedback that we're giving. And now they're starting to throw an adult-sized tantrum. And, these are people that we really can't work with because, this is, a long history of getting what they want and not being exposed to or having the experience of no. So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about behaviors that are tangibly maintained, and we're talking about behaviors that are inappropriate that can have long-lasting negative effects on your child as a teenager and adult. What do we do about this? How do we deal with it, really, so that it doesn't, have such a negative impact as they, become teenagers and adults? What do we do about it, Stephanie? What would you suggest? You know, if somebody comes to you and says, you know, Stephanie, every time I say no, you know, Michael, my 3-year-old, my 4-year-old, my 5-year-old throws a tantrum, and, you know, eventually me or my wife, you know, we just give in, you know, and so, and it's getting worse. What do we do?
So, I mean, that's actually come, you know, like as a professional and as like a friend, like personal, like coming up and talking to me about issues like that. And so, you know, you don't always want to say no, but sometimes no is no, right? You can't touch the hot stove, but I want to touch the hot stove. Can't do it. That's never a yes. And so there has to be a balance of some things are said yes to that are allowed and okay, and then some things are always a hard no. And then teaching. So what I've done and what I've suggested and recommended is, I think giving rationales is important. So you can't touch that hot stove because you're going to burn your hand, or it's going to hurt, or not all children or adults are, you know, they're not going to understand that rationale. Like they just hear no and that's it. But I think it's important to give a reasoning behind why you're saying no. No, you can't have that candy bar because we're going to eat dinner soon. And you don't want to get full before dinner.
So what if you give the rationale and they still continue to throw the tantrum?
So I've also recommended redirecting to something that they can have. You can't have this, but you can have that, offering a alternative or a replacement. And sometimes that doesn't work either, right? They really
What if
want.
they don't have a strong verbal repertoire? They're too young to understand all the words coming out of your mouth. So they're
Keep
throwing
it
a tantrum.
simple.
You know, what do we want to do?
So you ignore it. So you've said
You can
no,
ignore it, yeah.
you removed it, and that's it. You don't continue providing attention to it by repeating the answer. The answer is
Yeah.
no. You already gave the answer. That's it. And then you just ignore it.
Yeah,
Ignore
and
that
a lot of
specific
the times, the first time
behavior.
it happens, where you say no and they start to throw a tantrum, and you're like, "Oh, this is tough." It's going to last a little
Long
longer
time.
the
Yep.
first time, the second time a little less, the third time, you know, it's not going to happen as long, and then eventually, when you say no, that they can't have something, they might whine, they might cry a little bit. It's not the full blown out tantrum that you're used to. And then, you know, you're at a place where you're like, hey, if I say no and they don't throw a tantrum and they take the no like a champ, then you might say, you know what, I like how you responded to that, and you give them what they want and you reinforce it. But you know, the best way to deal with something like this is practicing this at home. Especially, both parents have to be involved. They have to be on the same page. And you know, it's not easy. It's easier said than done. But you know, this is something you're going to want to deal with, because if you work hard now at this, life will be easier later. If you give in now because you don't want to deal with it, you're going to deal with individuals that are going to become bigger and stronger, and you know, a lot more difficult to deal with. So we highly recommend you deal with this when they're younger. But you know, Monica, you were sharing a nice little strategy when you know, because obviously, Monica, you've dealt with this at home with your 3 children, and at some point you started going into the supermarket with all 3 of your kids, and I'm sure they're all over the place, and you're trying to deal with each one, and they want this and they want that. How did you, once they were able to, you know, understand the words coming out of your mouth, how did you deal with this at the supermarket?
One little trick I did was I told them to put it on their list. So even if it wasn't close to the holidays, when we would make Christmas lists or birthday lists, I would just always say, let's put it on your list. And at first we really did have a list. I would go back to the car and we would write it down, or even on your phone in the notes section. I'd be like, here, you could take a picture of it, or we could put it on your list. And it gave them something to do. It kind of transitioned them off of, like, it's not saying, no, you can never have it. I'm saying, no, we can't get it right now, but you can put it on your list. And eventually it didn't even really matter. They said, oh yeah, okay, we'll put it on our list. And then they would kind of forget or whatever, but unless it was something they really wanted. But it was just kind of giving them something else to switch their head to, like, no, I'm not giving them a hard no. I'm saying, not right now.
And it's kind of like what Stephanie was talking about with redirecting them. So that's a nice way of redirecting them. Yeah. And also, you know, delaying, you know, the reinforcer or the highly preferred item that they're asking for.
And I think one important thing that when Stephanie was talking about ignoring, just making sure that people know that she ignored the behavior, or we want to ignore the behavior of the tantrum or what they're asking about. Once you've
Okay.
said no, you don't have to continue talking about why they can't get, I mean, you can explain quickly if you want to, but even that, you can still redirect them and still engage them in something else. So it's not
Yep.
ignoring the child.
Yeah.
It's ignoring the behavior, and also them, if they could continuously ask for that, you can just kind of ignore that part, but still engage with them in lots of other ways. So I think that's important to people not think that, oh, we're just gonna leave our child there.
Yeah.
So
I think that we probably have some parents that are kind of thinking as they're listening, like, well, I grew up with nothing, so it's very important to me that my child has everything that I couldn't have, and they're not gonna want for anything. But imagine if you have all these things that you consider small and no big to give, like they can have this toy on Monday, here, have $5. Yep, you can watch the movie that you want to watch. All these little small things over the course of time. What do you think is going to happen when something big gets denied? Like, sorry, you didn't make the team. You don't get to play soccer. How do you think that they're going to be able to handle that and cope with that if you haven't practiced with those very small things that I agree, it's not a big deal if they have a toy. It's not a big deal if they watch the movie, but why not practice with something so small, so little, and really not a big deal in life, so that when the big deal thing happens, they're better prepared for it? Because you can't avoid those like you can avoid the other stuff.
deal with disappointment, and what can you, dealing with that feeling, and then, transitioning to something else.
Yeah,
Right.
well,
You have to have that experience as a child, preteen, teenager, young adult, and also as an adult, because if you don't have that experience of disappointment, then you're going to respond differently as a grown adult, like that, and it's not going to be appropriate. And that's what we were talking about earlier. Is that you're, as a teen, you're going to be uncoachable. People aren't going to want you on the team. You're going to be unemployable. People aren't going to want to work with you. If I give you feedback and you start to cry or you start to argue because you want to be right, chances are I'm just not going to want to work with you. And so you're not only off the baseball team, the football team, and gymnastics, but you're also now unemployed and single because nobody wants to live with you. It sounds funny. It could be that drastic. So, teach your children to experience disappointment, and it starts up at home. You're not going to be able to deal with this necessarily in a public setting, or it's harder to deal in a public setting. So it's better to start up at home. And when they're able to respond in a way that it's appropriate, when you tell them no, you might wait 30 seconds or less than 30 seconds and give them what it is that they want because of the way they responded.
And I think that that's really hard in some of the families that I've worked with, of first teaching them to ignore the behavior, right? So now you've learned to say no, and you've learned to wait it out. Then now having that mindset of, okay, they took no and like a champ, and they're not. So tell them they did a good job, or give them one M&M instead of two, or whatever it is that they wanted. And I think that's like a hard shift in well, you told me to do this and now you're telling me to do that. And then having that rationale of, well, you also want to like let them know that what they're doing is appropriate, and that's, and that's how, and then over time, you don't have to reinforce or tell them that they're doing a good job for doing what they should be doing, but you just want to let them know it's teaching them what's the right way and what's the not right way to engage in those when you're told no.
Yeah.
Very good.
I also think that when you're working on those things and you're going out into the and the outside your home, into the stores and things, setting the expectation when you are still kind of working through those things, especially with your younger kids, letting them know what's going to happen before, and sometimes bringing something, saying like, hey, if we go through the store, I'm going to tell you right now, we're not buying anything. We're going in for this, this, and this. Or I'm not buying you anything. You're not getting a toy. You're not getting any treats. But if we come out and we act like really great, we're going to get this. And so having something to reinforce just like a successful outing, I think is helpful, especially when you're working through. You don't have to do that forever. But I think sometimes that's really helpful, is like setting those expectations, and then reinforcing when they do have a good outing. So
Rules are good. reminders, priming them. I know that, I did that a lot with Harrison when he was younger, and now I can confidently go. I don't have to set those rules anymore, and I can go in the store and he will ask for, I want this bag of chips, I want these cookies, and I'm fine with telling him, nope, not having it, nope, 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 and he will try every time. It's, but it's just, he's older now, but I'm confident that he's not going to engage in maladaptive behaviors because I keep telling him no, that it's been established years before that no means no, and that's it. And then he's fine with it. And I don't have to reinforce those appropriate behaviors anymore because it's been done over time.
Thank you for joining us today at PLP, Parent Like a Professional. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to comment here on our video or visit our website or Instagram. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon. Take care.